The knife in my hand stopped halfway through the ham when Colin laughed. The sound bounced off the chandelier and slid down my spine. Natalie had just leaned over, fingertips brushing my sleeve, admiring the floral dress I had forced my body into. "You look beautiful, Grace. That color loves you," she said, her fork resting on the edge of her plate. I felt my cheeks warm, not from wine, but from relief. For a second, the room softened. Then Colin's voice cut straight through the table buzz. "Yeah, it's nice," he said, eyes sliding down to my waist. "That dress would shine if your waist actually behaved." His fork tapped his plate once, a tiny bright sound in the silence that followed. I watched a drip of gravy slide off his knife and stain the white tablecloth between us. Someone's chair creaked. Natalie's smile died halfway. Margaret's bracelet clinked against her glass as she pretended to sip. My chest burned. Months of little comments stacked behind my ribs like plates in an overfull cabinet. The old tops that used to work. The "wow, didn't know your waist could get that wide." The way he always said it like weather, not cruelty. Across the table, Margaret forced a soft laugh. "Grace, he's only teasing. You're taking it too seriously." The words hit harder than his joke. My hand put the knife down very carefully. My chair scraped back louder than I meant it to. I stood. The room tilted toward me. "Shut the fuck up about my body," I shouted. Every head snapped up as if I had broken something sacred. Colin's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. The fork in his hand hovered mid-air as if even it refused to side with him. A cousin at the far end cleared his throat, the noise sharp in the tight room. Candlelight flickered across the table, catching every stunned face. For a moment, no one breathed. I stayed standing because sitting felt like surrender. My hands tingled, not from anger alone, but from the shock of hearing my own voice filling a room that had never once defended me. Colin blinked hard, his jaw tightening. "Grace, what the hell is wrong with you?" he whispered, but the whisper carried, sliding under plates and glasses like a draft. Natalie looked at him first, then at me. "Colin, maybe don't," she started. He cut her off with a quick wave of his hand. "Don't get dramatic, Nat. She's been like this for months." His eyes met mine again, colder now. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Margaret reached across the table and touched my sleeve with 2 fingers, light as dust. "Sweetheart, sit down. Christmas dinner isn't the place for outbursts." The word outbursts curled around me like a rope. My breath pressed tight against my collarbone. I saw Evan lower his gaze, pretending to adjust the napkin on his lap, wanting no part in any of this. Colin leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, a smirk ghosting at the corner of his mouth. "If you can't handle simple observations, that's not my fault." The sentence landed with a cold click, like a lock sliding into place. Something inside me cracked again, smaller this time, almost quiet. I reached for my water glass just to keep my hands from trembling. The rim tapped the table with a soft, betraying sound. Margaret tried to patch the moment together with a brittle smile. "Let's just enjoy dinner," she said, lifting the serving spoon toward the mashed potatoes. Her voice shook on the last word. No one reached for the bowl. The air thickened, held together by tension instead of holiday warmth. Colin grabbed his napkin and tossed it onto his plate. "Unbelievable," he muttered, loud enough for the room to hear. "All I said was her waist could be smaller. That's not even an insult." His eyes flicked to Natalie. "You agree, right? It was harmless." Natalie froze. Her fingers curled around her wine glass and she shook her head once. Barely. "Colin, don't drag me into—" "So you're not going to back me," he said. His voice rose sharp, as if volume could rewrite the moment. Chairs shifted. Someone coughed. A spoon clinked against a dish. I could feel everyone's eyes darting between us, searching for blame or escape or something to soften the edges. Evan finally cleared his throat and spoke without looking up. "Let's keep voices down." But even he sounded like he didn't believe it would help. Colin turned back to me, tapping his finger against the table. "This is what she does. Every little thing becomes a crisis." He gestured vaguely toward my body. "If she didn't have such issues with—" "Stop," I whispered. It came out thin but steady, slicing through his words. He leaned forward, eyebrows raised, waiting for me to crumble. I stayed standing. Silence tightened around us like a belt pulled one notch too far. My breath tasted like metal. My fingers dug into the edge of my chair, grounding me, keeping me from shaking. From the corner of my eye, I saw Natalie bite her lip, as if she knew something was splintering beyond repair. Natalie set her glass down a little too fast, the base knocking against the table with a dull thud. "Colin, enough," she said quietly. Her voice wavered, but not from fear, from something closer to disbelief. He didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed fixed on me, like he expected me to apologize for the air I took up. The baby monitor in my bag flickered with a faint buzz. That tiny sound made something twist inside my chest. Months of feeding schedules, sleepless nights, a body trying to heal, and a husband who treated every change like a flaw he had discovered first. His comments were always said lightly, like weather reports, but they cut deeper because they came from the one person who had watched my body break itself open to bring our son into the world. Margaret tried again, her tone sharper. "Colin, she just had a baby. Show some grace." The room shifted. Evan lifted his eyes for the first time. Even he looked uneasy. But Colin only laughed under his breath, the sound flat. "Everyone's so sensitive these days," he said. "If she didn't want opinions, she shouldn't ask how she looks every morning." My jaw tensed. "I never asked," I said. The words came out low, almost level, but they made him pause. He blinked, thrown off for a split second. Then his voice hardened. "So now I can't speak in my own family's house?" The chandelier above us hummed from the heat of the bulbs. Natalie whispered something to Margaret, who pressed her lips together, watching me with an expression that was almost pity. I hated that look more than his words. Evan pushed back his chair with a slow scrape, the legs dragging unevenly against the hardwood. It wasn't loud, but the sound folded the room into a tighter shape. He cleared his throat again, deeper this time. "Maybe we should all take a breath," he said. His gaze flicked toward Colin, then away, as if he regretted stepping in the moment the words left his mouth. Colin scoffed. "A breath? Seriously? I make one simple observation and suddenly I'm a villain?" He gestured toward me with an open palm, almost theatrical. "Look at her. She's acting like I called her a monster." The way he said her made something in me stiffen. My fingers curled around the back of my chair. "You've been doing this for months," I said. My voice was quiet, but the quiet felt heavier than shouting. "You know exactly what you're doing." He leaned forward. "I'm being honest. That's what partners do. If you're too fragile to hear it, that's not on me." Natalie inhaled sharply, as if she'd been waiting for someone to say what she had already long suspected. "Colin," she said, "you know those comments aren't honest. They're mean." Her voice cracked at the end. He whipped his head toward her. "Wow, so you're taking her side now?" "That's not what I—" "No, go ahead," he said. "Tell everyone how wrong I am." Margaret reached for a serving dish just to have something in her hands. The spoon rattled inside it as she lifted it. She didn't serve anyone. She just held it, staring into the food as if she could disappear into it. I looked around the table. Every person seemed stuck between loyalty and discomfort, unsure where to place their eyes. My heartbeat steadied into something cold. The room suddenly felt too small to hold the truth that was rising. Then Colin exhaled sharply and pushed back his chair. "I'm done with this," he said. The legs scraped hard. Something in me knew the night was only beginning to split. Colin stood, the chair legs dragging behind him, like he wanted everyone to hear how fed up he was. The motion startled Margaret, who jerked slightly and set the serving spoon down too hard. It clattered against the dish, a sharp, hollow sound that made Natalie wince. The candles flickered from the sudden shift of air when he stepped back from the table. I stayed standing across from him, the distance between us feeling wider than the entire room. His eyes swept over me, slow, dismissive. "You always ruin things," he said. The words weren't loud, but they sliced clean. Every holiday, every gathering. "You make everything about you." A faint gasp came from someone near the end of the table. Evan looked away again, hands folded tight in his lap as if gripping something invisible. Natalie whispered, "Colin, stop," but he didn't even blink in her direction. I felt the room tilt as though the floor had shifted an inch to the left. My nails dug into the wood of my chair. "I've been quiet for months," I said. The strain in my throat tightened each word. "You don't get to call this ruining things. You pushed me here." He laughed, short, bitter. "By telling you the truth, sorry I don't coddle insecurity." His gaze dropped pointedly to my waist again, as if he wanted to remind everyone what the fight was about. Margaret pressed her palm against her forehead, shoulders slumping. "Colin, please," she whispered. It didn't stop him. "You want everyone to feel bad for you," he said. "That's why you exploded. You love the attention." The comment hit the table like a dropped stone. Even Natalie's face changed, something recoiling, almost shame for him, not me. My chest tightened, not with panic this time, but with something steadier, something that felt like a line finally snapping clean instead of fraying. I reached for the edge of the table to steady myself, and my fingers brushed a stray ornament centerpiece. The little bell inside it chimed once, soft, almost sad. Natalie pushed her chair back halfway, as if she wanted to stand but wasn't sure whose space she'd be stepping into. Her eyes moved from me to Colin, then to Margaret, searching for someone older or wiser to intervene. No one did. The silence clung to the walls like steam from a forgotten pot. Colin folded his arms and leaned against the back of his chair, claiming more space than he needed. "This is what I deal with," he announced to the room, not to me. "Mood swings, outbursts, zero accountability." His voice carried the smug ease of someone convinced the audience was already on his side. Margaret shot him a warning look, the kind mothers give grown children when they've crossed a line in public. "Enough, Colin," she said. "Grace is still healing. You know that." He rolled his eyes. "She had a baby, Mom, not surgery." The air went razor thin. Someone dropped a fork. It hit a plate with a metallic crack that echoed too long. My hand tightened around the chair back. Heat burned behind my ribs, but my voice stayed level. "You watched my body split open to bring your son here," I said. "And all you've done since is point out where it didn't snap back fast enough." Colin's jaw twitched, the first sign of discomfort. But instead of softening, he doubled down. "If you don't like my opinions," he said, "maybe fix the things I'm commenting on." Natalie let out a quiet, "Oh my God," under her breath, stunned at how far he was willing to go. Evan finally raised his head, meeting Colin's eyes for a single, heavy second. Something like disappointment flickered there before he looked at me and gave the slightest nod, a small acknowledgement of what he'd just heard. My breath steadied. The room was no longer tilting. It was sharpening. Then Margaret pushed her chair back abruptly. The legs thumped against the floor, loud enough to make everyone flinch. "That's enough," she said, her voice trembling. "We do not speak to people like that in this house." Colin stared at her, thrown off balance for the first time all night. And in that tiny interruption, something inside me loosened just enough for the truth to come forward. Margaret's voice was still hanging in the air when Colin stepped forward, closing the space between us by half an inch. It wasn't a threat, not exactly, but it was a claim, a silent reminder that he expected me to back down first. His breath hitched, quiet but sharp, as if he couldn't decide whether to argue with his mother or corner me instead. I didn't move. The chandelier hummed above us, a soft electric buzz filling the space his words couldn't reach. Natalie finally stood, her chair scraping the floor. Colin, seriously, stop. You're making this worse. He snapped his head toward her. You don't know what happens at home, he said. You don't hear her whining every day. Whining. The word slapped through me harder than anything he'd said before. I felt my stomach pull tight, a faint pressure rising behind my eyes, but nothing spilled. Not this time. Natalie's brow creased. She had a baby, Colin. Do you even understand what her body— Jesus, Nat, he cut in. You're acting like she's the first woman who ever gave birth. Margaret sucked in a sharp breath. Evan muttered something low, barely audible, but the disapproval in it was unmistakable. Even a cousin near the window shifted uncomfortably, pretending to adjust the blinds to avoid watching the slow unraveling at the table. I held his gaze. Do you hear yourself? I asked softly. Do you hear how cruel you sound? He lifted his chin. I'm being realistic. Someone has to be. My fingers brushed the edge of the table again, finding the deep groove in the wood where years of holiday plates had pressed down. I traced it once, grounding myself in something older than this moment. You call it realistic, I said, because you've convinced yourself I'm supposed to take whatever you say. He let out a humorless laugh. I'm your husband. If I can't tell you the truth, who can? Behind him, Natalie murmured, Truth isn't supposed to hurt like that. It was barely above a whisper, but he heard it. His shoulders stiffened. For a second, the room waited, every person holding the possibility that he might finally step back, maybe even apologize. But his next words shattered that hope clean. Well, he said, shrugging, if she didn't look the way she does, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The air snapped. My hand fell from the groove in the table. A cold clarity slid through me, thin and certain, like a thread finally breaking instead of stretching further. The dinner was over. Something else had just begun. Natalie stepped back as if his words had pushed her, though he hadn't touched her. The breath she drew sounded thin, shaky, almost frightened for me. Margaret covered her mouth with her fingertips, the gesture small but loaded with a kind of disbelief only a mother can feel when her grown son reveals something she can no longer excuse. Colin didn't notice, or he didn't care. He straightened his shirt, tugging once at the collar as if preparing to deliver some final, reasonable-sounding point that would make him look composed in front of his family. See? He said, gesturing toward me with an open palm. She's overreacting again. All of this started because she doesn't want to hear the truth about her own body. I didn't answer right away. The room strained, everyone waiting for me to break or fold or run. My hands were steady now, resting lightly on the back of my chair. Something had settled in me, heavy but clear. You keep calling it the truth, I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. But what you really want is for me to feel small so you can feel big. A ripple went through the room, chairs shifting, someone swallowing hard, Margaret whispering something like, "Oh dear," under her breath. Colin scoffed. That's ridiculous. Is it? I asked. You comment when I'm dressing, when I'm cooking, when I'm feeding our son, when I'm walking past you, when I'm not even talking, always my waist, my clothes, my shape, my size. I paused, letting the list hang between us. You don't say those things to help me. You say them because you know postpartum broke my confidence and it makes you feel powerful. His jaw tightened so fast I could see the muscle jump. A flicker of panic crossed his face before he masked it with anger. Natalie took a slow step forward, placing herself between us just slightly, not blocking, just witnessing. Colin, she said, stop pretending this is normal. It's not. He pointed at her. You're making it worse. No, she whispered. You are. Margaret lowered her hands from her face, looking older than she had 10 minutes ago. Son, she said quietly, you need to listen. He ignored her. Again. Instead, he leaned closer to me, eyes narrowed. This is what therapy is for, Grace. Not family dinner. Something fragile in the room cracked, an invisible fracture running straight through the table and into the floor. I didn't flinch. "You don't get to call my pain an inconvenience." He let out a harsh breath, shaking his head as if he were the one being wronged. "You know what? I'm done. I can't deal with you when you're like this." The chandelier hummed louder, or maybe the silence around us made it seem that way. Then he grabbed his coat from the back of his chair, the motion jerky, careless. A knife on his plate tipped and clattered against the porcelain. That was the moment everyone understood he wasn't stepping away to cool down. He was leaving. Colin shoved his arms into his coat sleeves with sharp, impatient movements, the fabric rustling loud enough to slice through the stillness. Margaret reached out a hand as if to stop him, but he stepped past her without looking. His footsteps thudded across the dining room floor, each one heavier than the last. Natalie moved instinctively toward the doorway. "Colin, don't leave like this," she said. Her voice shook, not with fear, but with disbelief. "It's Christmas." He didn't slow. "Yeah, well," he muttered. "She ruined it." The words swung back at me like a door slamming. I stayed where I was, fingers still resting lightly on the chair, the wood warm under my palm. I wasn't trembling anymore, not even a little. The stillness inside me felt foreign but steady, like standing in the eye of a storm that had finally stopped pretending it was weather. Margaret hurried after him, her slippers whispering against the floor. "Colin, please. This isn't how we handle things." He grabbed the doorknob. "I'm staying at Noah's tonight," he announced, louder so everyone could hear. "I'm not dealing with her drama." He yanked the door open. Cold air flooded in, brushing against my legs, lifting the hem of my dress. For a split second, he turned his head just enough for me to see his expression, tight, furious, proud. Then he stepped out. The door slammed so hard the wreath shook. The sound rippled across the room like a shockwave. Someone exhaled shakily. Someone else whispered, "Wow," under their breath. Natalie pressed a hand to her forehead, eyes closing. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to me. That was too much." Margaret turned back toward the table with a face carved from grief and shame. "He shouldn't have said those things," she murmured. Her voice was barely more than a tremor. Evan stood slowly, hands on the table for balance. "Grace," he said, meeting my eyes for the first time that night, "none of us think you were wrong to speak up." The reassurance wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it landed in the quiet like a small, steadying anchor. I nodded once, not in gratitude, not yet, just acknowledgement. The room was still. The candles burned lower, the plates were cooling. The holiday music from the living room played on, painfully cheerful. Then my phone buzzed in my bag, a violent, insistent shake that broke whatever fragile calm had settled. A text. I didn't reach for it yet. The eyes of the room drifted toward me, waiting. The buzzing didn't stop. It jittered through the fabric of my bag like something alive, something determined to be heard. I finally reached for it, fingers brushing past the baby's pacifier and a folded burp cloth before finding the cold edge of the phone. The screen lit my face in a pale glow. A message from Colin. Natalie took a half step closer, as if she could shield me from whatever was on that screen. Margaret hovered behind her, wringing her hands in a slow, frantic rhythm. Evan stayed still, watching with a calm that didn't erase the worry in his eyes. I opened the text. "You embarrassed me. You embarrassed my family. Your behavior is disgusting. I'm done apologizing for your insecurities. Get therapy." Each sentence appeared in its own bubble, one after another, short, clipped, as if anger alone pressed send. Another message arrived before I even finished reading the first. "You ruined Christmas." The words sank into me. Not like knives I could pull out, but like stones dropped into water, each one pulling the surface downward. Natalie whispered, "Oh God." She covered her mouth, eyes wide with quiet horror. "Grace, I'm so sorry." I didn't say anything. I stared at the screen until the brightness blurred and the room around me sharpened again. Then a third message landed. "Don't contact me tonight." My thumb tightened around the phone, the pressure grounding me. Margaret stepped forward, voice breaking. "He shouldn't talk to you like that. That's not how a husband treats his wife." Evan nodded once, a slow, solemn agreement that felt heavier than the words themselves. The phone dimmed, the messages fading into the lock screen. I set it face down on the table, the soft tap sounding final. "I ruined Christmas," I repeated under my breath, not believing it but tasting the shape of the lie he wanted me to swallow. Natalie shook her head, firm. "No, he ruined it the moment he thought your body was fair game." Her voice trembled with conviction she hadn't dared use earlier. Margaret blinked hard, fighting tears she didn't want to shed in front of me. The quiet stretched, not empty, full of something shifting. I took a slow breath. "I need to go home," I said. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't emotional, it was simply true. Margaret reached out gently, touching my arm. "Let me get your coat." But I shook my head. "I remember where it is." I walked toward the hallway, the floor cool under my heels, every step deliberate. Behind me, no one spoke. Not even the holiday music could fill the silence I left behind. The hallway felt different away from the dining room, quieter, dimmer, the air cooler against my skin. Family photos lined the walls, birthdays, graduations, vacations, moments frozen in time, smiling faces unaware of the fractures that would grow years later. My coat hung on the rack beside the front door, exactly where I'd placed it hours earlier when I still believed tonight would be simple. I reached for it. The fabric rustled softly as I slid one arm through the sleeve. That small sound, steady, controlled, felt like the first thing in the evening that belonged to me. Behind me, footsteps approached, slow, careful. Natalie stopped a few feet away, not blocking my path, not touching me, just close enough for her presence to be felt without crowding me. "Grace," she said, voice soft. "You don't deserve any of what happened tonight." I pulled the coat tight around myself. "It's been months," I said. The confession slipped out without effort. Every day, something new, something small, something I let slide because I was tired or healing or trying to be patient. Natalie's eyes widened, a flash of guilt passing across them. "I didn't know it was that bad." "That's the thing," I said. "He makes it sound like nothing." So I started acting like it was nothing. A shadow moved at the end of the hall. Margaret stood there, hands clasped together, her expression torn between mother and witness. She looked older in the hallway light, her shoulders slightly hunched, as if carrying the weight of everything she didn't stop sooner. "Grace," she whispered, "I should have stepped in months ago. I should have told him to stop." I shook my head. "He would have ignored you, too." She closed her eyes for a moment, accepting the truth as it landed. "He's not handling fatherhood well," she murmured, "but that doesn't excuse what he's doing." "He's handling it fine," I said. "He's handling me badly." Natalie let out a shaky exhale, almost a laugh, but without joy. God, that's exactly it. My phone buzzed again in my hand, one short vibration, not a call, a message. I didn't check it. I didn't need more of his anger poured into tiny glowing bubbles. "I should go," I said. Natalie stepped aside, giving me a clear path to the door. "Call me when you get home," she said. "Please," Margaret added, "text me too, just so I know you're safe." Their concern didn't fix anything, but it softened something sharp inside me, just a little. I opened the door. Cold night air swept in, brushing against my hair, crisp and startling. Christmas lights flickered across the lawn, casting faint colors against the dark. Behind me, Margaret whispered my name once more, but I didn't turn. I stepped out onto the porch, letting the door fall shut with a gentle click. The quiet outside felt different from the quiet inside. This one didn't hurt. The cold followed me all the way to the car, settling against my cheeks, tugging at the edge of my coat. I unlocked the door, the click echoing through the quiet street. The house behind me glowed with warm lights and muffled voices, but none of that warmth belonged to me anymore. Not tonight. I slid into the driver's seat and shut the door. The cabin light flickered once before fading, leaving only the faint glow from the driveway snow lights. My breath fogged the windshield in a soft cloud. The silence in the car felt cleaner, untouched by judgment or sharp words. I placed my phone on the passenger seat face down. The screen lit up almost instantly. Another message, then another, sharp pulses of light reflecting off the window. I didn't reach for it. Not yet. I gripped the steering wheel instead, grounding myself in the texture of it, feeling the slight chill of the leather beneath my palms. Through the windshield, I could see movement inside the house. Margaret pacing, Natalie picking plates off the table, Evan drawing the curtains closed, as if the night needed protecting from what had happened inside. I turned the key. The engine hummed low, steady, a small comfort. As I shifted into reverse, the porch door opened. Margaret stepped out, wrapped in a cardigan, arms folded tight against the cold. She didn't speak. She just looked at me, eyes heavy, sorrowful, apologetic in a way words could never fully hold. She lifted one hand, a hesitant little wave. I nodded back. Not forgiveness, not accusation, just acknowledgement of everything we both now understood. When I backed out of the driveway, my headlights swept across the lawn, catching the wreath on the door and the string of lights around the porch railing. For a moment, the scene looked almost peaceful, but the peace wasn't for me. I drove slowly down the street, the night opening wide in front of me, quiet and steady. My phone vibrated again, a rapid, angry pulse. This time, I picked it up. A preview flashed across the lock screen. "Unbelievable! You're acting insane!" Another message popped up immediately. "You embarrassed yourself." Not me. The cold clarity from earlier returned, settling deep in my chest. I placed the phone back down without unlocking it. The red light at the end of the block turned green. I drove forward, the road stretching out in front of me like a decision I had already made. The house felt too quiet when I walked in. Not peaceful, just empty, in a way that settled over my shoulders the moment I shut the door behind me. The baby monitor on the counter glowed faintly, a soft blue pulse in the dim kitchen. I hung my coat on the chair instead of the hook. I didn't have the energy to pretend everything was normal. I set my keys down. They clicked against the counter, sharp in the silence. For a long moment, I just stood there, hands braced on the edge of the sink, staring at the window's reflection. My face looked unfamiliar in the glass. Tired, yes. But something else, too. Like the version of me who had spent months shrinking herself, had finally stepped aside. My phone buzzed again on the table. One vibration, then another, short, angry taps against the wood. I ignored them. I filled a glass with water instead. The faucet hissed, then quieted. The first sip burned my throat more than it soothed it. I walked into the living room. Toys were scattered across the rug. A tiny sock lay curled near the couch. The bottle I'd washed earlier still stood upside down on the drying rack. All the signs of a life I was carrying almost entirely alone. The monitor buzzed once as the baby shifted in his sleep. That small sound washed through me, softening something rigid inside my ribs. I walked over, placed my hand on the edge of the crib, and watched his chest rise and fall in the faint light. My phone vibrated again. This time, the noise felt louder than it should have. I stepped away from the crib and picked it up, not unlocking it, just letting the notifications roll across the lock screen. Answer me. You can't ignore me all night. You acted crazy. You scared everyone. You humiliated me. You need help. 6 messages, one after another. No pause, no breath, no space for what I felt or lived or carried. My pulse stayed steady. I sat on the edge of the couch, the phone still in my hand, and said to the quiet room, "He doesn't get to decide who I am." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't meant for anyone but me, yet they rang through the house like a truth I had owed myself for months. My fingers hovered over the screen, not to respond, to block his notifications for the night. Before I tapped anything, another message appeared. You better not make this into some big thing tomorrow. A quiet laugh escaped me, small, airless, not from humor, but from disbelief at how predictable he was even in cruelty. I set the phone face down again. Then I leaned back against the couch, breathing slowly, letting the house fill with a stillness that finally felt like a choice, not a consequence. I woke the next morning to a pale light stretching across the living room ceiling, the kind that doesn't wake you gently, just reminds you that something heavy is waiting. My neck ached from sleeping on the couch, but I didn't move at first. The house was still, the kind of quiet that feels uncertain, like it's holding its breath. My phone lay face down on the coffee table. I didn't reach for it, not yet. The baby stirred in the bassinet beside me, a soft rustle under the blanket. I sat up slowly, the stiffness in my spine reminding me how long I'd sat in that same spot the night before, thinking, replaying, unlearning. I lifted him into my arms, his small warmth grounding me in a way nothing else could. He blinked up at me, unaware that anything in the world had cracked. I kissed his head. Hey, I whispered. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. When I set him in the bouncer and walked to the kitchen, the phone buzzed again, one long vibration this time, not urgent, just insistent. I didn't look. Instead, I filled the kettle, the water hitting metal with a muted rush. The mundane sound felt comforting, real, mine. As the water heated, I finally picked up the phone. A new message glowed on the lock screen. Call me when you're done being dramatic. My thumb hovered above the screen. I didn't unlock it. The baby made a soft coo from the living room, a small reminder that I wasn't alone, even when I felt it. I put the phone back down, face up this time, letting the words sit where I could see them for exactly what they were. Not truth, not reflection, not even anger, just control dressed up as concern. A knock rattled the door lightly. I froze. Another knock, softer. Then a familiar voice through the wood. Grace, it's Natalie. I opened the door a few inches. She stood on the porch with a thermos in one hand and dark circles under her eyes. I brought coffee, she said, and I needed to check on you. The cold drifted in around her, curling around my ankles. I stepped back to let her in. She looked around the room, the blanket on the couch, the untouched phone, the baby gumming the edge of a toy, and her expression softened with something between worry and resolve. I didn't sleep, she admitted quietly. I kept thinking about last night, and about what I didn't say sooner. I folded my arms, holding them close. You said enough. No, she said. I didn't. She placed the coffee on the counter, then hesitated before speaking again. Grace, he's been like this since before the baby. You know that, right? Her words settled between us, a layer of truth that made my chest tighten, but not break. Last night wasn't new, she said. It was just the first time he didn't bother hiding it. I leaned against the counter, absorbing each word like a slow, steady weight. The kettle clicked off behind me, a small sound that made everything feel even sharper. Natalie looked at me. Really looked. I'm not here to defend him, she said. I'm here because I don't want you facing this alone. Something inside me loosened, a tiny thread of relief I didn't know I needed. The baby squealed from the living room, and we both turned toward the sound. For the first time since the night before, I didn't feel like the room was pressing in on me. I breathed once, slow, and let the morning settle around us. Natalie followed the baby's laughter into the living room, her steps slow, almost tentative. She crouched beside the bouncer, wiggling her fingers until he squealed again, tiny hands batting the air. The sound warmed the room in a way the heater never could. I stood in the doorway watching her. Something about the way she looked at him, soft, protective, almost aching, made a quiet truth settle in my chest. She wasn't just here for me. She was here because she knew what her brother had become. When she stood again, she wiped her palms against her jeans, uncertain. "Grace," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I don't want it to hurt you, but I think you deserve it." My stomach tightened. Not with fear, just bracing. She hesitated, then looked toward the window as if the morning light would give her courage. "Before you got pregnant, he made comments about your body. Not as often, but enough that I remember thinking, why would he say that when he claims he loves her? I told myself it was just his sense of humor. But last night," her voice cracked, "last night I realized it's not humor, it's a pattern." I sat on the couch. The cushion dipped under me with a sigh, the fabric cool beneath my hands. Natalie sat across from me, leaning forward. "He uses your body as a target, and not because he's honest or blunt, because it works. It shuts you up. It keeps you small. It keeps him in control." Her voice broke on the last word. The baby kicked his legs, and the soft rattle attached to the bouncer jingled, a tiny, fragile sound in a room full of things too big to name. "I don't want to believe that," I whispered. "I didn't want to either," she said. "But last night, I can't pretend anymore." I let out a long breath, steady but tired. "He texted me nonstop." Natalie nodded. "Of course he did. That's what he does when he thinks he's losing control." I met her eyes. "What am I supposed to do?" She didn't flinch from the heaviness in my question. Instead, she moved to sit beside me, leaving just enough space so I didn't feel crowded. "You think about what you want your life to look like," she said gently. "Not what he thinks it should look like, not what his family expects. Yours." The words didn't come with pressure. They came like a doorway opening. My phone buzzed again on the table. I didn't pick it up. Natalie glanced at it, then at me. "You can answer him when you're ready, or not at all. Either choice is yours." Silence settled over us. Not heavy, not sharp, just present. I looked toward the baby, his eyes wide and bright, his tiny hands reaching for the string of sunlight on the floor. And for the first time since last night, a thought rose. Not loud, not dramatic, just real. I deserve better than this. I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it, clearly. The baby's soft babbling filled the room while the morning light spread further across the carpet, warming the spots where toys lay forgotten. Natalie moved to pick up a blanket from the floor, folding it slowly, her eyes drifting toward me every few seconds, as if checking whether I was still breathing under the weight of everything she'd said. I wasn't breaking, but I wasn't steady either. I stood and walked to the window, the cold glass cooling my fingertips. Outside, frost clung to the edges of the fence. A delivery truck rumbled down the street. Ordinary life moved on as if last night hadn't carved a fault line through mine. Behind me, Natalie spoke again, quieter. "He'll probably come home angry." I didn't turn around. "I know. He'll say he didn't mean it, or that you embarrassed him, or that you misunderstood." She paused. "He has a pattern, Grace." Her honesty settled like a stone, not heavy enough to crush, just heavy enough to keep me from floating back into denial. A small cry from the baby pulled me from the window. I walked to him and scooped him into my arms, his warmth pressing into my chest. His tiny fingers curled into the collar of my shirt, holding on with innocent certainty. Natalie watched us with a look that held both sadness and clarity. "You don't have to stay in a place that hurts you," she said, "especially not while you're raising him." I sank onto the couch with the baby on my lap. His head rested against me, soft and trusting. I smoothed his hair gently, breathing in the faint scent of his shampoo. Natalie hesitated before sitting again. "Can I tell you something else?" she asked. I nodded. "When I heard you yell last night, I wasn't shocked." Her eyes lowered. "I was relieved. because it was the first time anyone shut him down. The truth of that wrapped around me like something fragile but warm. I didn't shout because I wanted attention. I shouted because I had reached the end of being small. The baby cooed softly, shifting against me, grounding me in a way nothing else could. I watched his tiny chest rise and fall, steady and sure. Then my phone lit up again. A preview message glowed across the screen. "Be home in 20. We're talking about last night." No apology, no softness, just an order. I didn't pick it up. Natalie leaned forward. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked. I looked at the baby, then at the door, then at the phone. For the first time, fear didn't rise inside me. Something else did, something firmer. Something like a boundary I had never drawn before. I met her eyes. "Yes," I said. "Stay." She nodded once, steady and sure. And for the first time since becoming a mother, I didn't feel alone when the day began to turn. A low rumble of an engine rolled into the driveway 10 minutes later, heavy enough to vibrate through the floorboards. Natalie and I exchanged a quick glance. She didn't look scared, just braced, ready to witness, ready not to let me stand alone. I shifted the baby to her arms. She held him gently, swaying without thinking, her eyes fixed on the front door. My heartbeat stayed steady, not fast, not panicked, just present. The car door slammed shut outside. Footsteps approached, hard, clipped, familiar in the way thunder becomes familiar after living through too many storms. I didn't move toward the door. I stayed exactly where I was in the center of the living room, not shrinking, not folding. The doorknob twisted once. Then the door swung open. Colin stepped inside without knocking, jaw tight, coat unzipped, as if he hadn't decided whether he came here angry or righteous. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on me, then on Natalie, then back to me again. "What is she doing here?" he demanded. Natalie shifted the baby against her shoulder but didn't step back. "I'm here because Grace asked me to be." He scoffed, loud and bitter. "Of course she did." He stepped farther into the room, kicking the door shut behind him with his heel. The sound echoed through the house. "We're talking alone," he said, pointing at me. "No," I answered. The word came out calm, flat even. It froze him where he stood. "What do you mean, no?" His eyebrows lifted, disbelief dripping from every syllable. I didn't raise my voice. "I mean, no. We're not doing this alone." He blinked a few times, thrown by the steadiness he couldn't knock down. "You're really doing this? You're really making this some big issue?" Natalie stepped forward before I could speak. "Colin, stop acting like last night was nothing. We all heard you. We all saw what you did." His eyes snapped toward her. "Stay out of my marriage." "I would love to," she said, "but you made it impossible." He let out a harsh, humorless laugh and turned back to me. "Did you tell her I abused you or something? Is that what's happening now? You looking for sympathy?" I felt something inside me stiffen, but not break. I told her the truth. That you screamed at me. That you made a scene in front of my family. His voice rose. "You humiliated me, Grace. You humiliated yourself," Natalie said quietly. His jaw tightened, the muscle in his cheek jumping. "Give me the baby," he said, reaching his arms out. Natalie pulled back, tightening her hold. "Not right now." Something flashed across his face. Anger, frustration, maybe even the beginning of fear, but he hid it fast. "I'm his father, and I'm protecting him from yelling," she replied, steady. His attention snapped back to me. "Are you really letting her act like I'm dangerous? Seriously?" I didn't answer his question. I asked mine instead. "Why do you talk about my body every day?" He stared at me, taken off guard. "What? Why do you comment on my size, my waist, my clothes? Why do you do it?" He rolled his eyes, exasperated. "Because you need to hear it." "No," I said, "because you need to say it." For the first time, he hesitated, just a flicker. a half-second where his certainty faltered. I stepped forward, closing the distance by an inch, not to fight, just to stand fully in my place. "You don't make those comments to help me," I said. "You make them to control me, to shrink me, to keep me questioning myself." "That's ridiculous," he muttered, but his voice had changed, softer, unsteady, cracked around the edges. "It's not ridiculous," Natalie said. "It's obvious." He turned away, running a hand through his hair, pacing once in a tight line. "You're both blowing this out of proportion." "No," I said. "Last night wasn't the beginning. It was the ending." He froze, his back still turned, his breathing just loud enough to hear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't soften it either. "You don't get to talk about my body ever again." The words hung between us, sharp and clear, the boundary he never thought I would draw. He slowly turned back toward me, eyes narrowed, expression unreadable. "This isn't over," he said. But it already was, and he was the only one who didn't know it yet. He stood there, shoulders rising and falling beneath the half-unzipped coat, eyes locked on me as if he could hold the moment in place long enough to rewrite it. But something had shifted in the room, subtle, quiet, unmistakable. He felt it too. His gaze flicked to the baby in Natalie's arms, then back to me, searching for the version of me he was used to. Apologetic, small, doubting. She wasn't here anymore. He stepped closer, not threatening, just close enough to test whether I would move. I didn't. His nostrils flared, a faint tremor crossing his jaw. "You think you can talk to me like that?" he asked. "You think you get to make rules now?" Natalie shifted her stance, protective without being obvious. "She doesn't make rules, Colin. She sets boundaries. That's what adults do." He shot her a glare sharp enough to slice. "I wasn't talking to you." "And I'm done being talked over," I said. His attention snapped back to me. "Oh, so you're tough now? One outburst and you think you're—" "This isn't about last night," I said, cutting him off for the first time. The interruption stunned him. "This is about every comment you made when you knew I was too exhausted to defend myself." His lips parted, but no words came. I stepped forward, just one step, enough to reclaim space he always assumed was his. "You don't get to talk about my body anymore, not as a joke, not as an observation, not as anything." "That's insane," he said, voice cracking beneath the surface. "You're being dramatic." "No," Natalie murmured. "She's being clear." He turned to her again. "You're not helping." "I'm not trying to help you," she replied. His face twitched, hurt, anger, disbelief tangled together. "Unbelievable! You're both ganging up on me." I let out a slow breath. "This isn't a gang-up. It's accountability." He scoffed and paced toward the window, tugging at his coat sleeve. He looked out at the yard like he might find an escape there. Frost clung to the grass. A bird landed on the railing. Morning moved quietly while he unraveled in small, hesitant pieces. He turned back toward me, eyes narrowed. "So what now? You think you're some hero because you yelled in front of my family?" "No," I said. "I'm someone who finally stopped letting you narrate my worth." The room stilled. His mouth opened, then closed again. His next breath came unsteady. "I'm trying," he whispered. But the words didn't fit him. Not his voice, not his posture, not the months behind us. Natalie shifted the baby on her hip. The child reached toward me, tiny fingers stretching for my sleeve. I took him gently, feeling his weight settle warm and soft against my shoulder. Colin watched the exchange with an expression I couldn't name. Jealousy, maybe. Or fear. He swallowed hard. "Grace," he said, softer now, but still clinging to the old script. "Come on. Don't make this bigger than it is." I met his eyes. "It was already big. You just didn't feel it because it wasn't happening to you." His face fell, not dramatically, not theatrically, just enough to show the truth landing somewhere he didn't expect. For the first time all morning, He didn't have an answer. And the silence that followed didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. Colin stepped toward the armchair and lowered himself into it, elbows on his knees, fingers pressed together like he was trying to build a version of himself that might survive this moment. His eyes stayed on the floor. Not in shame, more like he couldn't find the angle where he still looked right. The baby shifted against my shoulder, warm and steady. I swayed without thinking, the motion soothing him more than it soothed me. Natalie stood near the doorway, arms crossed, her presence sharp and quiet, like a line drawn in pencil but heavy enough not to erase. Colin finally looked up. "Do you want me to beg?" he asked. "Is that what you want? Because I'm not doing that." His voice wavered, but he forced steadiness into it. "I'm not some villain." I kept my eyes on him. "Then stop acting like one." He blinked, thrown, not by the words themselves, but by how calm they were. He had braced for tears, shouting, apology. Not this. He leaned back, hands running through his hair. "You don't understand what it's been like. You've been distant, emotional, snapping all the time." I held the baby tighter. "I've been healing." He shook his head. "Everyone else has babies and manages fine." "Everyone else," Natalie said sharply, "didn't have you in their ear every day." He ignored her, eyes locked on me. "You changed. Everything changed." "Of course it did," I said. "We became parents." He looked away again, jaw flexing. "I didn't sign up for being the bad guy every day. I have needs too." The sentence hung in the air, ugly, exposed. "Your need," I said, "was power." His head snapped up. "Power? Seriously? That's what you think this is about?" "Yes." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're twisting this." "No," I said. "You are." He stood abruptly, pacing in a tight line, the floor creaking under each heavy step. "You're blowing everything out of proportion," he said. "It was just comments, just honesty. You can't keep falling apart every time someone mentions your body." "Someone?" Natalie asked. "Or you?" He shot her a look, furious. I took a breath, the kind that feels like stepping onto solid ground after months of sinking. "Colin," I said, "you're not hearing me. This isn't about one comment. This is about all the little cuts you made every day until I forgot what I looked like without your voice in my head." He froze mid-step. Then he sank back into the chair, staring at the floor as if waiting for it to speak for him. I shifted the baby to my other shoulder. "I love our son," I said, "but I won't raise him in a home where disrespect looks normal." His head lifted, eyes widening. "You're not taking him away from me." "I didn't say that," I replied, "but I am taking myself away from your cruelty." Something inside him cracked, not loud, not dramatic, just a small break, audible only in the way his breath caught. "You're leaving?" he asked. "I'm setting boundaries," I said. "Where that leads depends on you." He stared at me, the weight of the moment finally reaching him. Natalie exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for minutes. The baby sighed in his sleep, head nestled against my collarbone. Colin pressed his palms to his eyes, elbows on his knees. "I don't know how to fix this," he said, voice thin. "You start," I answered, "by never mentioning my body again." Silence settled, deep and unmoving. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He didn't speak. For the first time all morning, he was the quiet one. And the quiet didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. Colin stayed hunched forward, elbows on his knees, like the weight of the room had finally settled on his spine. The morning light drifted across the floor, catching the dust in the air, moving in slow ribbons. He didn't look up, not at me, not at Natalie, not even at his son. His silence wasn't peaceful. It was cornered. I shifted the baby against my shoulder. His small breaths warmed the side of my neck. That gentle rhythm steadied me more than anything Colin could have said. Natalie stepped closer. Not to confront him, just to stand beside me, a quiet line of support he couldn't bulldoze through. Finally, Colin dragged his hands down his face and let them fall into his lap. "So what now?" he asked. His voice was raw, but not from remorse, more from fear of losing control. "You want space? Is that it?" "I want respect," I said. He let out a hard breath, sharp through his nose. "I can't fix everything overnight." "I'm not asking you to fix everything," I said. "I'm asking you to stop breaking me." He flinched, a real, visible flinch. Natalie looked at him, eyes soft but firm. "She's telling you the truth. You just never listened long enough to hear it." He stood up slowly, like rising cost him something. His voice lowered. "Okay," he said. "Fine, I'll back off. I'll stop making comments." "That's not all," I replied. He frowned. "What else do you want from me?" "I want you to understand why it mattered." He opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. His gaze drifted toward the baby, and for a moment something close to clarity crossed his face. The child he claimed to love had slept through the entire confrontation, but he would grow, and one day he would understand tone, temper, patterns. I watched realization flicker through Colin's eyes. He didn't look scared of losing me. He looked scared of becoming the man his son learned to imitate. He sank back down into the chair. "I don't know how to talk about this," he admitted quietly. "I don't know how to be better." Natalie stepped into the silence. "Then learn." He looked up at her, then at me. "Are you going to stay?" The question didn't sting. It didn't pull. It didn't even feel like a decision I had to wrestle with, not after everything. "I'm not leaving today," I said, "but I'm not staying under the same rules as before." He swallowed hard. "So you're... what? Watching me?" "No," I said. "I'm watching myself." The baby stirred. A tiny sigh pressed against my collarbone. I held him a little tighter. Colin leaned back, exhaling shakily. "I'll try," he whispered. "Trying," I said, "starts with your silence." He nodded once, unsure but listening. Really listening. Maybe for the first time. Natalie touched my arm lightly, not asking, just anchoring. For a long moment the room stayed quiet. Not heavy, not sharp. Just honest. And in that fragile quiet, something inside me unknotted. Not forgiveness, not peace, just the first small breath of freedom. Colin rose from the chair slowly, as if the floor beneath him had changed texture. He walked toward the door, stopping with his hand on the frame. Not leaving, not staying, just hovering in the space between the man he'd been and the man he might become. His shoulders sagged in a way I had never seen before, not defeated, just stripped of the excuses he'd worn like armor. He glanced back at us, at me with the baby resting against my shoulder, at Natalie standing steady beside me. His voice came quiet. "I need time." I nodded once. "Take it." He opened the door. Cold air swept in, brushing across the carpet. He stepped outside without another word. The door clicked shut behind him, soft but final. Natalie let out a long breath, shoulders dropping as if she'd been holding herself upright for hours. "Are you okay?" she asked. I didn't answer right away. I looked down at the baby, his small fist curled against my collarbone, warm and trusting. The house felt different now. Not empty, not heavy, just mine again. "I think," I said quietly, "I'm finally starting to be." Natalie smiled, small, tired, real. She touched my arm gently before stepping toward the hallway. "I'll make us some tea." I nodded, and she disappeared around the corner. I walked to the window. Outside, the frost on the railing was beginning to melt. A thin line of sunlight pushed through the clouds, touching the porch steps, brightening them inch by inch. I stood there with the baby in my arms, listening to the faint hum of the kettle in the kitchen, feeling the house settle into a slower rhythm, a tiny shift of weight, a soft breath against my collarbone, a quiet I didn't need to fear. I set my hand on the window frame and let out the smallest, steadiest breath. It didn't echo, it simply rested. If any part of this felt familiar, you're welcome to comment.